what I want to do is if software developers are still around in 5 years, what are the skills that they will absolutely still need? Assuming we haven't hit AGI, the skill that you need is problem clarification, bringing clarity to problems. When you have just any random person on the street who can go and type into an input and suddenly an app appears, the difference between that random person on the street and a software engineer who's been doing this for a long time, the output is going to be vastly different. I think we can all agree with that. And what made that output different is that the software developer knows how to bring clarity to what they're trying to have the agent do.
Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Hey, everybody. How's it going? How are you doing, Eric?
I'm doing pretty good.
Well, today I'm pretty excited because we have a special guest on the show in the studio right now. We have Kent C. Dodds, and we've mentioned Kent before, and really he's been a staple in the JavaScript community for a long, long time. I was introduced to him through his work at PayPal when I was doing a lot of front-end development and I wanted to learn more about JavaScript, and Kent was there to teach us all about JavaScript. So it's been quite a long time. And I've even attended his in-person workshops and his virtual workshops. So of course, when I heard that he was working on something related to TypeScript, which we'll get into later, we were excited to invite him onto the podcast. So we're so thankful that he accepted. So Kent, welcome to the show. For those of you who aren't as familiar with what you do and what you've been up to, could you just introduce yourself?
Happy to. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate that very much and your kind words. Thank you. So for the last over a decade, I've been developing software and trying to help users have a really positive experience using software. And yeah, for the first part of my career, I worked at a couple of companies to do that directly. And then I found that I'm actually relatively good at influencing others to do that themselves by teaching them how. And so that is what I've spent the last, let's see. I went full-time as an educator in 2019. I took a little break to do a startup with my friends called Remix. We got acquired by Shopify, and I went back to teaching full-time. So a little bit of a break, but yeah, it's mostly been full-time teaching since 2019. I created testingjavascript.com, and then epicreact.dev, and then epicweb.dev. And then I updated epicreact.dev. And then I made epicai.pro last year. And I just released a new course on epicweb.dev. And I've got some other really epic things coming soon this year.
That's awesome.
Really epic. Sounds like an epic time.
Yeah, I actually have the Testing JavaScript course. I think you were one of the only people that actually had put out training on how to do proper testing.
Yeah, I think there were some courses probably on Pluralsight and Udemy, but no course that was as comprehensive as testing JavaScript. And in fact, I think that might relatively still be true, though I have onboarded some other instructors onto epicweb.dev. So it's not just me there. And Artem, the creator of MSW, has been basically recreating all of testing JavaScript on Epic Web. And so if you're thinking, oh yeah, I really do want to get into testing, probably testing JavaScript will still be useful. And people still buy it, they still go through it and they love it. But it is old and it goes through, the way that I taught back then is different than the way I teach now. And so Artem has adopted the way that I teach now, and he's redoing everything with the latest technology and everything. So I would recommend going to epicweb.dev/testing and picking up what he's got. He's almost done with everything that testing JavaScript has. And when that happens, I think I'll probably just turn testing JavaScript into buy Artem's thing on Epic Web because it's really good.
Yeah, that's yes.
I mean, arguably it's more important now than it ever has been. I'd say.
Should we start talking about that? Because that's kind of what we wanted to bring you on to the show to talk about today. So just as a preview, you're coming out with a new TypeScript course. It's called Practical TypeScript Foundations and Fluency. And one of the first things, and I'm on your mailing list, and one of the first things that you mentioned was the number one question that you get from people, from your students, is why should I take this? Like, if I'm going to have coding agents do all my coding for you, especially in TypeScript, does it really matter if I know TypeScript? And I guess that's a good place to start. Like, what do you say to people when they say that?
Yeah, it's a super question. And on my mailing list, I called that out specifically because I knew that people were going to be wondering about that, because my mailing list is primarily people who are experienced programmers already.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, that's been my target audience since I started teaching full-time, was people who already have some experience with programming and don't know a thing yet. And my job is to accelerate your acquisition of that experience. And so, yeah, so the question is, well, like, now, do people need to acquire experience in a thing because agents are able to fill in those gaps? And I think there are a couple of answers to this. First of all, people who don't have any experience with programming need to have some sort of onboarding process, like to not only the development tools, but like the vernacular to use. Like, how do you talk about programs? And so that really is, honestly, it's the target audience of this course. I don't want people who are experienced to just turn this off and say, oh, okay, this isn't for me. No, there are gaps that you have in your knowledge that can be filled by this workshop series. And so it definitely could be for you. Take a look at everything that I've talked about, what's covered in these workshops before you make that decision. But the target, the reason I made it actually is because there is a local college here in Utah. Last year, I reached out to them. Actually, it was like a year and a half ago. I reached out to them and I said, hey, I noticed you're teaching React. How would you like to just use Epic React as your curriculum? Because whatever you're making, I'm sure it's great, but like, this already exists. Why don't you instead spend your time on other things, serving your students? I've got the curriculum for you. And so they did that. And in fact, my alma mater, BYU, has also done that for one of their classes. And it's gone super for them. So they reached out to me this year and said, hey, we really like the Epic React stuff for our React class, but we have one course that is just really bad, really old. We need to replace it. And so we need curriculum for that. And we would like you to make that curriculum instead of us doing that. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. So okay. It's basically an intro to programming, a class that it is. And I was like, well, that's something I've always wanted to do, was I know zero about coding. How do I get into this? And so that's why I made this. And so that's also why the first 2 workshops are completely free. It's a 5-workshop series. First 2 are completely free because I don't want to be in the business of making money on people's hopes and dreams. Maybe this is something I'll be interested in, maybe not. And so I'm going to let you try the first 2. And if you get through those and you're happy, then buy the whole bundle and you get the other 3. So yeah, that was kind of the impetus.
One, that's quite the pedagogical vote of confidence if a accredited college is like, hey, can you help us make curriculum for this beginning programming course? That's a huge vote of confidence, I think.
Thank you.
For sure. And yeah, and we all have gaps. This really reminds me of the Rob Connery book, The Imposter's Handbook, where he wasn't classically trained as a computer scientist. I think, Kamran, you weren't either. There's a lot of things that you just never pick up unless you do that. And his book was a lot like that. It's like, oh, these are maybe some things that you missed. And you can still be quite effective. And in fact, I would probably say you probably don't need most of that that I went through in my schooling. But
that was always a criticism for the university curriculum that we had, because the computer science program, and I think, Eric, you would agree with this, they didn't actually teach you how to do programming in the real world. It was more like theoretical.
Yeah, academic.
And I didn't go through that program. I went to the business school, and the business school did have an introduction to programming, and it was Visual Basic, and we built a blackjack game, and that was pretty practical, I would say, because I learned how to use Visual Studio, how to write Visual Basic, and I'd known some programming before that. But then again, it doesn't go into here's how to do design patterns or here are algorithms, right? So there's still gaps in my learning. And Kent, I wanted to quote something that you said recently in one of your newsletters. you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's a famous phrase, and I've used that phrase too. But I think for people who are lifelong learners, they kind of understand that. They know like I don't know everything, and I need to fill in my gaps. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, and that your course is not just for people who are total beginners, but also senior software developers who maybe have worked with TypeScript, but there's still gaps in their knowledge. And we have a segment on the show called Secrets of the Handbook, and there's always stuff that I don't know about. And I've been using TypeScript for a long time. And I always appreciate that from your courses where you actually show us, like, here's how to do stuff practically.
Yeah, I typically when I'm teaching something, I like to build our own version, like implement it, and then at the end we'll be like, and guess what? We don't need to build this, it already exists. But like in the process of building that thing, you understand it better. And maybe that kind of gets into why anybody should be learning TypeScript in the age of agents.
Mm-hmm.
Let me answer this with an analogy. I just built a home. I'm living in this home that I built. We moved in last year, but I shouldn't say I built the home. I didn't build the home. I paid somebody to build it because I don't have the time or to acquire that experience. If I were to build it myself, it would be falling apart. We wouldn't not be having this conversation. And so I used money to accelerate my experience of actually having a home. But what that means is because I did that, there are so many things in this home, even the technical things like that a technologist should know that I don't understand. And if something breaks, I have to call the builder and have them come and fix it. Either that or I have to like put in the work to learn it and figure it out. And so I can fix it myself, which I progressively am doing more and more of that because the pain of not having it fixed in a timely manner is greater than the amount of time that it would take to learn it myself. But if I'd built it all from scratch myself, then I would know it really well. So we're balancing this in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can have an agent build you an entire application, and maybe one day we'll be able to just have the agent do everything. A bug shows up, we just say agent bug fix, and for a lot of things, we are there already with the agents. But at the same time, it costs money to have that agent do things for us. And so you're balancing that with the value of your time versus the value of that money. So there is balance there. In addition, the less you understand about the software, the less you understand about how things are constructed, the less you are thoughtful about the trade-offs, the more expensive the agent is going to be. And the more like you'll get to the end of the project and realize, oh, we built this in a serverless environment, but like we have use cases where that just doesn't really work very well. This is a bad application of this technology. And now I have to spend $1,000 in tokens to get it over to this other environment. And again, maybe eventually things will get good enough that the agent will just know as you're building it, like our current decisions here are bad, let's move it over. And so you can avoid those, but we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more you understand what the agent is doing, the more efficient the agent is. So it'll be faster, it will be cheaper, and the end result will have less correcting when it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you brought me to McDonald's. I wanted to be at Wendy's. If you understand the layout of the town and you can see that they're driving you to McDonald's, you can correct them before they get there and say, no, we're going to Wendy's. Oh, okay, great. And we just saved 5 minutes and gas money or whatever. So
I find that works like knowing what questions to ask is like part of that barrier is like, if I don't know anything, I don't know where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
I know I want maybe this end goal, but I don't know how to talk about programming.
And the agent, like you can talk to the agent and say, I don't know this. Like, here's what I want, but like, I don't know anything about this, and like go back and forth. And so like there's a skill at working with the agent, but if you don't have any experience, you don't even know that you should be asking telling the agent what you don't know. And like that conversation is, like the agent could recommend something and an experienced developer is like, no, that's not where we should go. But a non-experienced, non-technical person would be like, I guess so. Yeah, sure. Like whatever you want. And lots of the AI assistants are so reaffirming anyway that they'll just say, yeah, this sounds great.
Yeah, no, I definitely am like, are you sure about that? What about this little nugget? Are you sure about that? Look at this website.
Yeah. And that could change in a year. Like last year, things are so different now than they were even 3 months ago. Like November, things just really changed. Opus 4.5 and GPT 5.2 were like massive game changers. 4.6 and 5.3, both of those also big improvements on what we had before. So maybe in a year, it will just be such a, like, we can't even conceive what it could be, but nobody can really predict that. So are you going to sit around and twiddle your thumbs and hope things get better? Or are you going to just like take some ownership and improve yourself today? I think the version of you who improves themselves today will be better no matter what the future looks like.
Totally agree. I really like this quote that really echoes that sentiment. AI lowers the barrier of entry, but it doesn't raise your ceiling, which I thought was just the best little pithy nugget. I'm going to like tattoo that on my forehead.
Yes, that's on the landing page for the practical TypeScript, because that's the first question that you answer. And it's kind of funny. I have recently been using the Claude agents to build some stuff for me. Now, this is like what you would call like personal software. So these are not production software. Here's an example. I had to give a presentation to my Girl Scout troop, my daughter's Girl Scout troop, and teach them about compound interest. So I was like, how can I make this kind of interesting? And I was like, you know what? I could bring up a calculator online that's like a compound interest calculator, but they're all kind of boring. And so I asked Claude, hey, I'm talking to a Girl Scout troop. Could you make me a compound interest calculator that's like Girl Scouty? Like it has a Girl Scout theme. It's kind of fun. And sure enough, it did it in about, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes. And it's just a HTML page with JavaScript and CSS, and that's it. And it's something that I can easily bring up. I brought it up on our iPad, I brought it up on a phone, and I brought it up on the laptop. And all the girls were able to play with the calculator, and it had different personas, because I was like, it'd be kind of fun to have different characters. And they have like someone starts with some savings and then they contribute a certain amount per month. Some start with $0 but they wait for 20 years. So how does that look like? And it's like animated and all sorts of stuff. And it's just something that I wouldn't have built, myself, because I just don't have the time. Like I was able to prep for that entire meeting within an hour, and I could go the next day and give that presentation to them, and they had a blast. And it's just something that they might never see again. So it's not something that needs to be perfectly built, or like I really don't truly need to understand exactly how it works. I do need to verify, though, that the calculations are, accurate.
Yeah.
But that really brings me to the next question, which is, what are those skills that are important right now when working with agents, and also just in the future? What kind of skills do you think are important? Because I feel like there's a shift from like code as craft, as that was something that was really important, but now maybe code as craft is a bit lower in the importance level, but there are other skills that are superseding that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a ton. And if you're in the software world, you probably have been thinking about this as well a lot. So as an educator, actually in the last 3 months, I've had 2 existential crises. The last one was just a couple of days ago. As an educator, like I said, my target audience are experienced software developers who don't have experience with a particular thing. Now, the practical TypeScript stuff, that changes things a little bit, which makes it hard for me to sell, because I don't, like, my audience is full of people who are already experienced, and this is kind of targeted for inexperienced people. So if you have friends or family who want to get into coding, I need you to recommend this to them, because I can't reach them. Anyway, thinking about how can I serve my primary audience of experienced developers, I have thought, like, okay, so maybe I teach people how, like, my whole thing is teaching people how to make excellent user experiences. That's all, like, that's the end goal. I want you to be able to make an excellent user experience. And so my thought is, well, I mean, I could just do another workshop series on building a web application and teach you how to do that along the way. And the fact is that how you do that has changed a lot. Maybe we're not looking at the code as much, and we're talking to the agent and having agents review it and whatever. And so I can teach you that. I'm teaching you workflows. And that's a lot of my peers have gone in that direction, teaching workflows. And I think a lot of people listening right now are like, yeah, I would buy that course. I would love to see how Kent C. Dodds develops websites in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is 3 months ago, my workflow was very different from what it is now. I am going to guess that in 3 months, my workflow will be different again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty confident this is not the end of the road. I do feel relatively confident that software developers will still be a profession in 5 years. So, and maybe even in 10, who knows? We really can't be that sure. But let's if we assume, okay, we're going to reach AGI, well, then everything is different and everybody's like, you can't plan for that. So we'll pretend it's not going to happen. We'll say software developers around in 5 years. So if I say I'm going to teach you workflows, then I can't make a course. Like, it takes me months to make a course in the first place. By the time I finish, the workflow is different.
Right.
And so I could say, all right, we'll just do live workshops all the time. And you show up to a workshop, and that morning I decide what I'm going to teach you so that it's the latest and greatest of everything. And I've got some peers who do that. The problem with that is now you're spending hundreds of dollars to learn something that will be beneficial to you for like 3 months. And then you have to come back. It's like the chiropractor. You can't stop going or you'll start hurting again. My brother's a chiropractor, so I can kind of make that joke. But so I don't want to do that either. Like, I don't feel like that's fair to people. And so what I want to do is, if software developers are still around in 5 years, what are the skills that they will absolutely still need? Assuming we haven't hit AGI, the skill that you need is problem clarification. Bringing clarity to problems. When you have just any random person on the street who can go and type into an input and suddenly an app appears, the difference between that random person on the street and a software engineer who's been doing this for a long time, the output is going to be vastly different. I think we can all agree with that. And what made that output different is that the software developer knows how to bring clarity to what they're trying to have the agent do. And I actually there's this startup locally that wanted me to be a technical co-founder. And I seriously considered it. And I said, you know what, let's try an experiment. Had him here in my office. I stood next to him with the agent, and we went back and forth with the agent to bring clarity to this problem of what he wanted to build. And then I sent a cursor long-running agent off to go and do it. It did a pretty good job, and like, it needs, like every agent thing, like, it needs a lot of work to get polished and all of that stuff. And so I just handed it to him. I said, give this to your engineer and maybe it'll be helpful. But that process of sitting there with him, that was where I realized, like, oh, this is a skill. Like, being able to talk with him and know what questions to ask him and know how that impacts things and know what is in scope and out of scope for an MVP. That's a skill. And it's not just for MVPs. It's when the stakeholders come to you and say, there's this, like, the search is slow. Well, an inexperienced software engineer is just going to go tell that to an agent. The search is slow. But an experienced engineer is going to ask questions like, why is the search slow? Like, what happens when you do this search? Well, like, it just takes me forever to find what I'm looking for. That's a little different from what you said. And so, like, being able to get clarity on problems, I think, and really good judgment is what's next for me, what I'm going to experiment with and try and teach people. Because I do think that we are in a spot now where the actual code implementation actually really matters a lot less. All of the practices that make coding for humans really good and better, clean code and all of that, I think lots of the fundamental principles still matter. But like, just yesterday, I noticed that because I don't really look at the code as much anymore, but I was looking at it and I said, oh, that component is like 2,500 lines long. That's a pretty big component. And so I asked the agent, I said, I think we're at a spot where it'd be a good idea to break this thing up into a couple of components. And there are good reasons to do that. And I know that because I'm a software engineer with experience. Like, okay, like, you have this little component that needs to re-render itself. Well, if it's in a bigger component, the whole thing renders. But I thought, oh, you know what? Actually, no, that state is shared across all this. So yeah, this, like, there's basically just global state for the whole component. So that's fine. And so I knew, like, technically there was not really any reason to split it up. And so I asked the agent, which would be easier for you to work on? Can you work on this as a 2,000 line component, or would it be easier to work on it as, like, split up into multiple components? And the agent's like, I don't care. I'm like, either way is fine. And I hadn't experienced any problems with the agent being slow or producing bad stuff or whatever. It was fine. Maybe the component was a remix component, not a React component. So maybe that has something to do with it too. There's no use effects or anything like that to worry about. And so remix is probably a simpler and better mental model. But yeah, my point is, what was really good for humans, breaking things up into, like, digestible chunks and stuff, I think that for the most part, that's still, like, pretty good for agents. but it's decreasing in how much that matters. And so what really matters is system design and knowing the trade-offs that are being made, understanding when the agent explains trade-offs to you. When you say, hey, if we were to deploy this with this provider versus this provider, which would be better? And when it explains trade-offs to you, understanding what that means. What I'm trying to say here is, and sorry that I'm struggling to articulate this. This is the first time I'm really like practicing my words around this. Experience still matters, but it's the experience in bringing clarity to a problem and identifying the use cases that are the most important to focus on. And agents can help us with that. And we can develop that experience in the same way that you can develop experience building React apps. But my job, what I think I'm going to be doing if this experiment goes well, is teaching people or accelerating people's acquisition of the experience of how to bring clarity to a problem.
I love that.
This is kind of like speedrunning, being like an architect or a general contractor. To go back to like the building housing metaphor, I like to think of programmers a lot like data plumbers. We just got to get this data from here to there, and how it happens, that's up to us. That's our discretion. But at the end, we're just showing data from one spot to another. We're building CRUD apps, Yeah.
I actually think that because that's so much of what we've been doing as programmers for so long, that it's actually agents have gotten really good at that part of like, okay, take data from this thing, put it into this thing. And so that's a big reason why I don't feel like I have to review code as much, because like I'll see a file and that'll be like, okay, this file is responsible for requesting podcast episodes through the Transistor API. I see that it exists. Maybe I look at a method or two or something. Okay, they got caching. Good. I've got these things in my mind that I know are going to be problems. And I just see, okay, it's got, but am I looking at the details of those? No, not at all. I don't look at the details at all. Instead, I have an agent that goes through and looks at the details to find like, oh, you're not handling this error case, so go ahead and handle it. And then the agent just like kicks off another agent to go fix it. So like the way we work is very different now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awesome. It really is awesome.
Yeah, this is bringing up a lot of different thoughts for me too, because I've had very, very similar thoughts. I gave a presentation to a group of like 3,000 people. I had a slide. It was about creating agents, and I had a slide that was like a spectrum, or basically like a horizontal spectrum where I had coding on sort of the lower end, and then I had like strategic thinking, design thinking, system engineering on the high end. And I was saying what's happening now is a shift where what we used to do as developers was focus very much on the low end, where we were crafting code and we were down in the details. But now agents have started to creep up on us, right? And they've started to take on this quote unquote low value work as far as like a business goes. Like that would be low value work is kind of how they would look at it. But then what does that mean for us? Well, that means for us that we can start to move up. We can actually move up a level, and we can start to focus more on high-value activities like system design and design thinking and things like that, because then it's more about, if you're in the system thinking space, there's this famous quote, build the right thing, and then build the thing right. So it's talking about effectiveness versus efficiency. Effectiveness is building the right thing, which is making sure that you're asking the right questions up front. Are you defining the problem space correctly? Are you exploring the solution space correctly? And then once you figure that stuff out, then you can be more efficient. Then you can dive deep into making it more performant, quality practices, all sorts of things like that. They're both really important, but you don't want to build the thing right before you figure out what you're building, right? Because then you're just going in a whole different direction.
You're just pouring cement around the wrong thing, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. So what you're articulating is something that I've been feeling too, and haven't really articulated yet, just like you, but it's something that I feel like I'm seeing. And I work with, ChatGPT and Claude every day doing stuff, and I do use it to help me with my software engineering, but it's almost in more of like a coaching fashion where I'm like, hey, even just this week, I was running into like a weird issue where a path segment in the URL, if it ended with a period, I would get an error with the framework I was using. And I was like, do you have any ideas? And they're like, well, this can be a common issue with Win32 path validation in this specific framework. I'm like, oh, actually, that does make sense. And they're like, and the agent, ChatGPT, is like, try flipping this flag on. So I did, and it fixed it. And I was like, okay, yep, that makes sense to me. But then the next thing that I did was, what does this flag do? Right. And so I went and I researched it, and I was like, okay, well, this is kind of a security parameter. So flipping it to false is maybe not something I want to do long term. So I implemented the code to make sure that just prevents it from happening in the first place. And so that I can, as a human, institute a long-term goal of like, I can turn that flag back, right? Because I don't want to introduce a security vulnerability to my app. So I love what you're saying about like critical thinking, judgment, system design, design thinking. These are all like really skills that are going to become more and more important as we enter this age of like agents able to take care of a lot of the coding as craft stuff for us. So I think that really brings us to, you are teaching now a course on TypeScript. So how do you see, first of all, why did you pick TypeScript? And second of all, how do you see that fitting into this picture?
Yeah, well, TypeScript is the most popular language on GitHub, and that says something. If you combine it with JavaScript, which is the third most popular language on GitHub, then it's far and away the most popular, and it has been for a long time. And anybody who tries to split those two things up and count them differently is just silly. It's all just one big JavaScript tent. In some programs, you have special linting characters. It's really all it is. So it's the biggest language, and there's a good reason for it. And it's not because JavaScript and TypeScript are technically the most type safe or sound or whatever. Like, I honestly couldn't care less. The reason that it is so great is because it runs everywhere. And no matter what you do, if you're building on the web, you have to write JavaScript, or at least you have to tell your agent to write JavaScript. And so in my career, TypeScript is really the only language that I know. Of course, like HTML and CSS and whatever. But as far as programming language that I'm writing every day, it's going to be TypeScript for over a decade. And so I wouldn't choose anything else for myself. But I think it's a really solid choice because it's generally applicable to everybody, no matter whether you're planning on writing TypeScript for your backend or you're going to be doing PHP and you're doing a JavaScript front end or something. It's just so widely applicable. And my focus has always been the web. So that's why TypeScript for me.
Yeah. We love the web here. What do you always say, Eric? Always bet on the web?
That's right. Well, I think I'm quoting Brendan Eich on that one. But yes, the web kind of delivered on the promise that Java was trying to do. It's like write once, run anywhere. And JavaScript kind of delivered on that. And now it's true with server runtimes and desktop runtimes that we are seeing now, bespoke runtimes that run on embedded devices. Really, JavaScript kind of did the thing that Java said it was going to do. And it's very approachable. You know, one thing that I can kind of see now is one of the biggest selling points for me for TypeScript in particular is it's good for teams. And then that things that are good for people are also good for agents, which are also good for people. So if it's good for teams, it's good for agents too.
Yes.
Because now they have some sense of the structure across apps, across files where they might not otherwise. And then they have tooling that can reinforce that. Not just like, oh, these strings look like they're right. I can actually run deterministic tools that verify whether or not I'm correct.
That's right.
Yep. It's fabulous.
And you've probably seen this already, Kent, but we just covered the state of JavaScript in the last one of the recent episodes. 77% of respondents are saying that they're using TypeScript, and 40% of all respondents use it 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So that's
massive,
way
low.
Yeah, it's a massive chunk. And
Should be more.
I honestly, liars. We've been doing this for so long now, folks.
Yeah.
Like, get with the program.
And that's what Daniel Rowe, like, that was the headline for the conclusion of the survey, was like, TypeScript has won, and not just as a language, but as like as a bundler. Like, we're starting in TypeScript or ending with TypeScript. Soon you'll be able to write TypeScript everywhere, including the browser, if the types of as comments proposal goes through. But for sure, you can write TypeScript natively now in Node.js and Bun and Dino, right? Fantastic. So do you want to give people a preview of what they can learn in this course? So again, it's TypeScript Foundation, Practical TypeScript Foundations for Fluency. So what can people expect?
Yeah. So, first of all, like I said, it is targeted for people who've never programmed a day in their lives. And so I don't teach you how to set up your development environment and all that stuff. I have an article that I point you to if you don't already have a choice on like, what editor do I want to use? Like, what is a terminal and stuff. So you can go through that. And then, so by the time you land in the first workshop, I assume that you already know how to run commands in a terminal and you have an editor that you're using. But that's all that I assume. And so the first exercise is teaching about expressions, and also I throw in console log in there because like you need to get that feedback. And so I say, here's this console log thing. We'll talk about it later, like the specifics on what those things are. But like, just trust me, trust the process. Console log. All right. Inside of these parentheses is an expression. Let's talk about what expressions are. And then in that first workshop, we go from expressions all the way to like type inference, arrow functions, void and never. Like we don't touch on objects or arrays or anything like that, but functions felt like a really important thing to get. Like we were talking about console log in the first exercise. I got to teach you what a function is. And then in the next workshop it is, oh, and by the way, like as far as the scope of this is concerned, there are 252 videos altogether that average just over 2 minutes. So it sounds like a lot of videos. It is a lot of videos, but the real value is in your hands on the keyboard. And if you've never taken an Epic workshop before, there are actually quite a few free ones that you can go through. In fact, the first 2 of this series are free to get an experience. Kamran, you have done this. So why don't you tell people what your experience has been like with the Epic workshop learning environment?
Yeah, I love this. And so as someone who produces video courses for Pluralsight, one of the things that I always thought was one of the least effective things is like you don't get your hands on the keyboard when you go through a video course. And that also includes like watching YouTube videos. So the number one thing that I love about Kent's own courses is that they're all in the browser, and you can even use your own editor too, and you can hook it up. And so you're doing these exercises in the Epic Shop app, like the Epic Workshop app. And so not only are you viewing the lessons in there, you're seeing the code in context, and you can even use, like I use Visual Studio Code to go through it. So I can make the changes there in the Epic Workshop app on my local machine. I can see the changes there, and then I can verify my solutions. And so Kent has an awesome feature to do like a diff between what you just wrote and your local solution, or your local file system versus what the solution is. And you can do a diff. And so when you think that you got something right or you got something wrong, first of all, the app still might work, like you might pass the test because it's like test-based, which I think is also awesome. And so you run the tests, you see that they work, but then you see that maybe Kent did something different than you did to do something. So there's lots of like little learning experiences within that and lots of learning moments. And then if you are stuck, you can easily see like, okay, what do I need to do to get unstuck? And I just really like how you've set this all up as like an interactive, hands-on experience. It's exactly what I would, love to see. Pluralsight does have some of that stuff, but you combine it in such a great way, including the audio video material too. So I get to hear you and see you talk about the concepts beforehand, and then we get into the hands-on stuff afterwards. So that's why I really love your workshops.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that very much. And the things that you mentioned specifically of like hands on the keyboard. So when I say 252-minute videos that are each like a little over 2 minutes on average, that sounds like, okay, so I can add that up. I think it's like over 9 hours of video or something. Yeah, sure. That's great. You're going to be spending way more than 9 hours on this. Like you spend a bunch of time hands on the keyboard actually doing it yourself. And like there are a lot of pieces of like research on retention that I have included as baked in features of the workshop app, elaboration and generation, and like a whole bunch of other things that like retrieval, like spaced retrieval practice, and so many things in there that are just built into the way that the workshop app works.
You got a lot of pedagogy. Like I work in ed tech, so like this is all like, yeah,
you're vibing, yeah,
I'm vibing right now.
There's something, a really important thing that I love about the workshops that I totally forgot to mention. And maybe you can speak to this if this is included in the practical TypeScript, but the cohort that you get to be put into. Because when I was doing the MCP workshop, there was a lot of back and forth with other students in the course for like, people sharing cool stuff that they did like outside the course too, like, hey, I'd made this thing with MCP, but then also like getting help with each other. And so you could jump into the forums and be like, you could help each other. You could ask for help. And then the other cool thing is like we were sharing news as it came out. Like I remember the Cloudflare MCP code, like code as the code as agent or whatever. Code mode. And we were talking about that. And sure enough, you came out with like a newsletter or an essay that talked about that. So there's a lot of like interactive learning with other people too, with the social cohort-based learning.
Yep, absolutely. And for anybody who wants to create their own cohort, I have a process for you making your own set of like 10 people that you go through together and come up with a schedule and all of that stuff, because that learning together is really valuable. Really, the way that I've designed my workshops is to simulate as closely as possible the actual work environment. And so that's why, yes, it runs in a browser, but your editor is what we're using. Like it saves to your file system in the same way a regular project would save to your file system. And like everything simulates what the actual working environment would be. Some of my workshops, not these, but some of my other workshops have an actual database that you're working with. And that's also running on your machine. So doing everything that I can to simulate that. We've got emoji characters through all the instructions and everything that have these different personas. And one of them is Peter, the product manager. And he's coming to you with user requirements and explaining to you how what you're about to do is solving an actual user need. You've got Kelly, the coworker, who will do work for you and say, hey, I already did this. You just need to finish this last little piece. Like that is exactly what it feels like to work on a team. And so everything that I'm doing is just trying to simulate what it would be like to work in an actual environment where you don't know this yet, but you're going to learn it by solving this problem. So anyway, to get back to the content of these workshops, we've got the structured data workshop where we talk about objects, arrays, maps, object or array methods, destructuring, spread and rest, all of that. And by the time you get done with those first two workshops, you should have a pretty good feel for the language of TypeScript and JavaScript. And once you get to this point, you'll have a good idea of whether you feel like it's worth investing more in your acquisition of this knowledge. And if you do, that's when you pay, is for these next three. So the next one is type safety. We start with type aliases and talk about why I prefer them over interfaces and when to use interfaces. We do talk about interfaces, but we also go all the way through like any versus unknown, intersection types, generics. So it actually does get like relatively advanced. I'm not writing generics every day. I'm not writing anything every day, actually. But because I understand these concepts, my agent is a lot more effective. But so we do some of the more basic type safety things that you will want to know if you're going to be a professional in this industry. And then I have a section on object-oriented TypeScript. I don't really use classes much in my day-to-day programming, but the school that I made this for, they really want that because in a future class that they have, they're going to be doing classes with another language. And so I said, okay, I'll put it in there and I'll explain why I don't really use it and when I actually do. And actually in Remix, a lot of the way that data is managed and everything actually will be largely class-based for potentially, like it doesn't have to be, but I think that I will be using more classes there. So there are definitely use cases. And so we've got some sections on that, inheritance and polymorphism, composition versus inheritance, like the private members and static and all of that stuff. And then the last workshop is advanced TypeScript, and that one is async stuff. I could probably make an entire workshop just on async await and promises.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't think anybody needs to go quite that deep. And so I didn't make a whole workshop. We've got 2 exercises, and each of these exercises is broken into a bunch of different subsections or steps. But a bunch of stuff on promises and async, really critical for you to learn. We talked about modules and lots of type operators and utility types that are built into TypeScript and conditional types. And that actually is really cool. When you see TypeScript, you're like, types are just an expression. And I could do like all kinds of things with, these ternary types and stuff, or these conditional types. So, and for every one of these things, you've got hands on the keyboard exercises with instructions, with the tests, with the diff, with chat, with actually each one of these workshops also has 2 extra projects that are like, they don't have a solution. It's just like, here's an existing project. Here are some ways that you could improve it, and like take it as far as you want. Like because this is so beginner, one of them is just like one long script with a bunch of utilities and stuff like that. The other is like a full-blown React app. So like none of these are actual applications, like none of the exercises. It's all very scoped to specific use cases of things. But then, like, how does that apply practically in a real world? Well, here's a React app. I know you don't know React, maybe, and that's fine. Here's this utility file that this React app needs. I need you to fill in all of these things using the things that you learned in this workshop to make that React app work. And now maybe you're a little React curious, and so you dive into that and you start changing things and stuff. So the entire experience is set up to facilitate a really great learning environment, and one that you're practicing in the same way you will actually develop software. So you're using the same editor. Maybe you're using an agent to solve the answer. Like, I do not recommend turning off the agent or the tab complete or whatever. When I do the solutions in my recorded videos, I am typing the code. I'm not using an agent and saying, just do it. But I'm doing a lot of tab complete and then explaining what's happening. And that's what I recommend. Like, if you're using an agent, if you're just using Claude Code for everything, tell Claude, finish this exercise. But your goal is to be able to review that code and make sure you understand what's going on. So however you develop software, I want you to practice that with this. And then when you're done, you go to an actual project. Like, we all have this experience where you go to the actual project after learning something and we're like, now what? What do I do? Like, I'm stuck here. But because of the way that I've structured this, you go into that actual project, you're in the very same interface where you practiced all of these things. Like, it's the same. It's the same thing. And that's really important to me, clearly.
Yeah, I love it. And one thing that I was curious about is how you've actually integrated AI workflows into the app itself, because I believe that there's an MCP server in there that learners can use.
Yeah. So at the end of each exercise, we have the elaboration and feedback step. So writing down what you learned is one of the retention techniques, and me getting feedback is also good for me to improve the workshop. But on that page, in addition to a video that's me telling you a dad joke, because levity also helps with retention, interestingly, there is a prompt that you can give to your coding agent that tells the agent to quiz you on this exercise.
Ooh.
But it specifically tells the agent to use the Epic MCP server because that server has special instructions on how to properly quiz you for retention.
Mm-hmm.
And so it like asks you one question at a time. It has access to all of the context for that exercise. And so not just the written stuff, but also the diff between the problem and solution. So it knows what you actually are supposed to have done in that workshop exercise. And also the transcripts for the videos as well. So it has, I mean, sometimes it can take quite a few tokens. So like I'm finding ways to trim that down a bit. And actually, I haven't told anybody this, but I'm working on an Epic agent where I will do that for you and then send you the questions. So maybe one day that'll be a thing. But in any case, it will start asking you questions and you say, oh, I actually don't really understand that. Or I have the answer, here it is. And it's actually your answer is incorrect. And it can help with that. So
I think what I love about how you've integrated MCP is a really great use case on why MCP is useful. Because yes, you could go to your own agent without any extra context and be like, here is what I'm learning, and here's the code that I wrote. Can you quiz me on it? But it's gonna be missing all that critical context. But MCP lets you wrap that up into a nice little package that you can give to any of the agents, and they have all the right stuff to be able to do it the way that you would do it as an instructor, which I think is really cool. And you've been using, not only have you been using MCP, you've been doing AI coding tools since they've been introduced. And I think for our listeners, maybe we wanted to close on some thoughts about any tips that you have for people that are having to deal with coding agents at work, or maybe have been intimidated by them / skeptical of them, I guess, of like, hey, I've tried this and they don't seem to produce the output that I expect or wish they would do. So, yeah, what kind of hot tips do you have?
Yeah, a lot.
We need every single one. No, I'm just kidding.
Yep. New show.
If the agent isn't producing what you want it to, then the inputs, well, so there are a couple of reasons for that. Of course, the inputs could be bad, like skill issue, whatever. It could also be that you don't understand the limitations of the agents as they stand today, because they are still limited. But let's talk about the inputs, because you can't control that. The agents are constantly getting better, but you don't really get to control that too much. But the inputs are not just the prompt that you send, but all of the code that already exists in the code base, the architecture of the existing code base, how well it's documented, all of that stuff. How easy is it for the agent to identify what you meant when you said, move the button 6 pixels to the right? Well, which button are you talking about? Or is this a single button app? So you develop an intuition the more that you use this. And if you watch what the agent is doing and even just ask it, try to identify ways that you can make it more efficient. So like, oh man, it searched all over the place for this. And that either is me needing to be more specific and mention files specifically, or it's me needing to have a document that explains the architecture of this application. And so that it can kind of intuit where certain files are supposed to be. Okay, the Remix app is over in this directory. Great. Then I know that if you're talking about some UI thing or something, I'll go over there. And so just consider the fact that the input to the agent is more than just what you're typing. It's what you've typed already. It is your documentation and your current architecture and the current patterns. Like I remember in big companies, millions of lines of code, add patterns just spread everywhere. And that's not necessarily because the engineers are bad. It's just like as things evolve, things kind of happen and you add more and more to this abstraction. And now it's like the behemoth abstraction that nobody wants to touch. And when you have to touch it, you touch as little as possible and then you get out and it just becomes worse and worse. And, or like we do this in this way over here. I don't want to figure out the right way to do it, so I'm just going to do it the same way. And now that bad pattern is everywhere. The agent is going to do that same thing. You have to have some sort of documentation that says, we used to do it this way. We don't do it that way anymore. We do it this way. And then what's really cool is because agents are so good, you could literally have an agent and say, we used to do it this way. We want to do it this way now. Go fix it. And it'll just fix all the bad patterns everywhere. It's amazing. So like, and I do that pretty often. So let's see, there was another one that I wanted to, closing the agent loop is really important. So making sure that the agent, like if you're sitting here going back and forth with the agent on everything, you're missing a big piece of what makes agents so useful. And that is telling the agent a thing to do and then telling the agent how to verify that it did the right thing. Mm-hmm. And so lots of times that's going to be running your automated tests, and lots of harnesses or like coding agent software now kind of has that built in. It'll say, okay, once you finish your thing, make sure you've got tests and whatever. But finding ways to make it so that you don't have to be there to tell the agent what to do next or how to verify things, that enables you to run many agents at once. And even if they're working in the same code, because you merge one and you tell the other rebase on main, and then make sure that you're applying whatever changes happen in main, make sure that you're applying those same sorts of things here, but then also do what my original request was. I do that a lot. And in fact, I've closed all open issues on active projects because I'll have I had 12, 15 agents running at once where each one was like, solve issue 2, solve issue 37, solve issue 365. And like, no joke, solve issue 2. Like this was a years old issue. I just never had time. And then once I finished saying, okay, solve all these issues. So I've got like 12 agents running at once in the cloud. And I use Cursor for everything. But then I said, you know what? There was this other feature I wanted to add that I just never thought was worth taking the time to. I spent like 2 minutes writing a short, like 1 paragraph explanation of what I want. And boom, off it goes. And I did that from my phone. So like, this is the way we work now. And now the next bottleneck that I'm running into now is polish, because agents are not bad at polish because they're bad at polish necessarily. They're bad at polish because I cannot articulate polish very well. Mm-hmm. I need to play with it. So like, do this. Now I play with it. Oh, that doesn't feel right. Now do this. And so that's a synchronous thing that I have to do with the agent. I'm not sure how to solve that.
That's a personal taste thing too. It's kind of like an artistic eye. Like, it's a thing that's like, I don't know how to put this in words even. Yeah.
Lots of people call it taste, whatever that's supposed to mean. But yeah, just like it's a feeling that you have to use to really get it. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, I actually enjoy that process of like, okay, change it this way. Let me play with it. Okay, now change it this way. And like that back and forth, that's kind of fun. Even if it's just like, just yesterday, I was building this app. I call it Kids Ledger, which is just like, here's the money that they have in their savings, they're spending money. And like, as they'll give me their money so they don't lose it. And now I've got it in this little ledger. Here's like their charitable donations, stuff like that. And so when I add money to their account, I have confetti rain down from, like, hooray, you've got money. And so I was playing with that and saying, okay, I need it to be faster. I need more confetti. I need it to like be spread out over a long period of time. And like most of these were just change this one number, but I'm still telling the agent to do it because it's just more fun that way. And the other interesting thing is like, sometimes you think, oh, I just need to change this one little bit of configuration. It'll change it this way. But I will ask the agent anyway, because I'll find out that actually impacted this other thing that I wasn't even thinking about. So I have opted to pretty much use the agent for just about everything. And it works great. It costs money. It definitely costs money, but it costs less because I know what I'm doing. And that's to bring us back to the original thing.
Yeah.
Practical TypeScript. The better you know what you're doing, the more efficient you'll be with the agent, the faster you'll be, the more money you'll save. Maybe the more money you'll spend, but the more you'll ship and ultimately, hopefully make the world better.
Fantastic. I feel like that's a mic drop moment.
That's a great ending, I think. I don't know if I can do anything better than that. That's such a great summary.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Kent. Where can people go? First, to check out this course. Let's start with that.
Yeah, epicweb.dev/practical-TypeScript. Or just, check out epicweb.dev, look at the pro workshops. And I am all over the place at Kent C. Dodds. Very active on X, and I have a pretty active website, also kentcdodds.com. Actually, if you have questions for me, I have a podcast of my own where you can actually be a guest. It's called the Call Kent Podcast. You can record yourself asking a question or bringing up a discussion topic, and then I will respond with my response. And I added just recently, this is one of those features where I was like, I never thought I would get around to doing that. But now with AI, I can. I added a feature where you can actually type your question and select a voice, and an AI-generated voice will ask your question for you. And they're really good. So, if you've got any other follow-up questions, check out the Call Kent podcast.
Awesome. And of course, we'll include all those links in the show notes. Thank you again, Kent. It was fantastic. Excellent discussion. I think that a lot of people are going to learn a lot of stuff. So I really hope they go check out your course. But thank you so much for joining us.
I appreciate that so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks again.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to typescript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at comronigus.com, and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.